If you've played Helldivers 2, then you know that it's not a very easy game to run, especially if you're not playing it on a top-of-the-line brand new PC. In this video, I'll be going over the settings that I've come to use that have allowed me to get the best FPS without losing much graphical quality whatsoever. Now quickly, before we get started, please be sure to leave a like on this video, as it greatly helps me out. Before we move into the in-game settings, there's a couple of things I want to mention before we get started outside of the game that can actually greatly improve your FPS as well. Now, the first and most basic thing is going to be to make sure that you've updated yourself to the most recent graphic driver. Now, especially in a brand new game like this, running that most recent driver can actually have a pretty substantial change to your FPS, depending on if they've made a bunch of changes to the driver around that game or not. So the next thing that I recommend doing is definitely going to be a little bit more difficult, but that is going to be enabling XMP. Now what this is going to do is have an effect on your RAM, and it is going to basically allow it to run the speed that it's supposed to out of the box. In many cases, when you buy your RAM, say for example you bought DDR5 6400 MHz RAM. In many cases, when you first install that into your motherboard, it will naturally start running at, say for example, 4800 megahertz, which is substantially slower. So what you want to do is go into your BIOS. Now you can easily do that once your PC is shut down. As you start it up, you'll see your motherboard brand show up, and it'll have a certain key that you can press to enter the BIOS. You'll enter into the BIOS, and once you're there, you're going to search for a setting called XMP. You're going to enable that, save your settings, and boot back up. And I can just about promise you, you are going to see an improvement in your FPS from just that one setting alone. Before we go ahead and jump into the in-game settings, I feel as though it's very important for me to show you my system specs. Now, as you can see here on screen, my system is not the most up-to-date system, but it's still very powerful. And my reason for showing you guys this is mainly so that way, as I'm showing you all the different settings and the FPS that I get, so that way you have a little bit of a baseline and you have an idea whether or not you might get more or less. So now that we finally got into the in-game settings, the first thing you're going to want to do is click over on display and then come over here to resolution. Now specifically if you're playing on a TV, I recommend dropping to anywhere from 1440p to 1080p to try and give yourself some better frames. Now if that doesn't do enough, what you can do is go down one thing to render scale. Now typically, I believe when you first start playing, this is going to be on native. But if you need to, you can drop this. And the more that you drop this setting, the better performance that you're going to get in-game. It's going to make the game look a little bit worse. And especially if you go all the way down to ultra performance, it's going to look worse. But you're going to be able to run the game substantially better. Now, I recommend doing that specifically if you have already lowered all of your graphic settings down as much as possible, and you're still not able to run the game very well. So now I'm going to click on my graphics settings, and I'm going to go through and lower all of the settings as much as possible that are going to have an effect on my FPS. So I believe the sharpness also starts at 1, but I recommend putting that to about 0.5. It just makes the game look a lot better. But basically you're just going to go through and put everything down as much as possible. Now, using async compute, depending on your system, this could definitely have an effect on your FPS. For me personally, I haven't really found any difference, but definitely play around with this and see if this has an effect on your FPS. I have heard from some people it actually does, so like I said, definitely check it out. But now we're going to go ahead and hit apply, and I will see you in game. So now, as you can see, I'm in my ship. Now, I tried to go in-game multiple times, although every single time, things kept changing around me, and it ended up affecting the frame so much I could not get anywhere near an accurate test. But as you can see, my FPS is in the top right-hand corner, and I'm getting around 130 FPS, around there, and that translates pretty well to in-game. Now, once you start to get into some pretty crazy battles, it does go down, and I will show some gameplay of that in just a second here. But as you can see, when I go over to the options and go to my display and go to the render scale, and I put that all the way down to ultra performance, you can see what will happen. Now, as you can see, everything around me and all the graphics get really, really bad. I don't know what that weird thing is glitching in there, but whatever, don't mind that. But anyway, they get really bad. And on the ship, you don't really notice any performance change, at least with my PC. But in game, I'm convinced at least a 10 to 15 FPS difference. Although, honestly, I would rather just suffer that FPS loss and just play on native. But if you're really struggling, I strongly, strongly recommend playing around with the setting and seeing what it does for you. So now that I've shown you how the game performs and how honestly pretty bad it looks on the lowest settings, now I'm going to show you how it looks while we take everything up to ultra. Now I'm going to leave this render scale here on native, but pretty much everything else I'm going to turn back up to max like I had before, and that I will be showing the FPS as well. Now, a lot of these settings are definitely going to be things that you definitely don't have to have on the max, but for this test, I'm just going to be showing everything on ultra. Except use async compute. We're still going to be leaving that on no. But go ahead and hit apply. We'll come right back over here. Now, as you can see, the game does look substantially better. I mean, the game's absolutely beautiful. But you can see my frames went from all the way up to 130 down to about 88, 87, as you can see here. So now I'm going to end up going in and I'm going to show you some gameplay, and I will show you what kind of FPS I'm getting in game. So as you can see, we're really not in any crazy type of battle here, but I'm only really getting around just 60 FPS. Now honestly, for me that's pretty much playable, although now that we're dipping a bit below, and once we get into some crazier gunfights, I was honestly dipping into just the high 40s. Personally, for me, I would much rather just be in some more optimized settings and be getting into the higher 70s or maybe 80 FPS range. So that's what I'm going to end up showing you guys next, is my totally optimized settings, and that's pretty much what's allowed me to get the best and most playable FPS without losing hardly any graphical quality whatsoever. And finally, I bring you my optimized settings. So as you can see here, once we're recording, I did lose about 8 or 9 FPS, I will admit, but I'm now getting around 104 to 103 FPS. So the settings that I changed, once again, you can see I'm still on native render scale. For the graphics, I'm on ultra texture quality. I have also turned on depth of field in bloom once again. I'm on high object detail quality, high render distance. Going up to ultra is sort of pointless because you just end up losing more FPS, and honestly the amount that you can physically see is still the same. It's just the amount of like detail in the things that you can see at distance. Most of the time you're going to be fighting things close up, you won't even notice this. Shadow quality. Comparing side by side, there is very little difference between like medium to ultra, and the amount of performance that you're going to lose is huge. Keep that on medium, I promise you will see a massive difference. Particle quality, you want that on high because that's going to make a massive difference in how the game actually looks. Reflection quality doesn't really matter too much at all. Just keep that on low, it's going to improve your FPS quite a bit. Space quality, low. This is just pretty much going to be the sky. You're not really looking up in the sky, does not really make a difference whatsoever. Keep that on low. Ambient occlusion, keep on. Screen space, global illumination on. Vegetation and rubble density, I keep this on high. You could put this on ultra, but it's going to take more FPS. I wouldn't really recommend putting it any lower than high because it's not really that big of a deal, and you definitely want that. Terrain quality, keep on high. You're going to be looking at that literally non-stop. Volumetric fog quality, put that on medium. In general, putting that up to high is just going to hurt your FPS. Medium's a pretty good sweet spot for it. Volumetric cloud quality, keep this on low. It's not really going to make too much of an effect. Once again, that's in the sky. Lighting quality, putting that on low, you're not really going to see too much of a difference just from gameplay, and that's going to have a pretty big effect on your frames. Keeping that on low is definitely recommended. AA, definitely want to keep this on if you want the game to look nice. And then once again, async compute, no. So as you can see, I'm getting about 104 FPS. When I'm not recording, I'm getting about 110. And now we're going to go in game and show you what the performance is looking like while we're actually playing. So now that we're finally in game with the optimized settings, as you can see, we immediately get straight into a gunfight. And the best part is, with these settings, we really don't ever dip below 70 FPS. Now, since I've been playing with these settings, I've only seen myself drop below 60 FPS twice total. And those two times were both when the 50 BMG or whatever it is, the massive nukes, when those got set off. Other than that, I have never seen myself dip below 60 FPS using these settings, and the game looks absolutely phenomenal. Now, I would strongly recommend that you try these settings out for yourself because it's worked very well for me, and hopefully it'll work as well for you. Now, hopefully by this point in the video, you have successfully optimized your game and you're now running at a lot better FPS without losing any of that amazing graphical quality that this game has to offer. Now, if this video helped you out, I really hope that you'll consider leaving a like and definitely consider getting subscribed because I'm going to have a ton more Helldivers 2 content coming out very soon. But thank you so much for watching, especially to this point in the video, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.